Good afternoon, friends. Welcome to another Word of Gord. Average Folks in the Afterlife, number 47. And rather a dark day here in southern Ontario, cloudy and rainy. And I've turned on the illuminations as far as they'll go. So no caught dramatic effects here, just working with the available light. The Multidimensional Traveler by Kartika Go. Today's subject of out-of-body travel, experiences on other planes, etc., etc. Kartika Go. This book is a couple of years old and not that well known as far as I can gather. I don't see anyone talking about it or discussing it. Where did I discover it? I think she was maybe interviewed by Carrie Cassidy on Project Camelot. Came across it that way, sounded interesting. Kartika's a young person, much younger than me, and most people that write about out-of-body travel. Not that that inhibits her in any way. She's rather good. And seems to have entirely her own method of doing so, which I never quite figured out from the book, but her experiences are quite fascinating and profound. And early on in the book, she starts talking about, earthbound spirits that seem to roam into her space. And I think her experiences are interesting enough to be read here. Here's a subchapter called A Lost Angel. After my month-long winter break, I arrived back at my apartment in Los Angeles. Normally, I cleanse my home when I've been away for a week or more, as I don't want earthbounds constantly flocking my home for assistance. Good point, Kartika. I have a life of my own in the physical world, after all, and I needed to remain focused on college and maintaining my grades. However, this time I was extremely jet-lagged and exhausted when I got back from the airport. And so I foolishly headed straight to bed without performing my customary cleansing. As I was drifting into sleep, but still in full consciousness, I felt a light slap across my right cheek. I knew instantly that someone was trying to get my attention, so I quickly separated from my physical body. Almost immediately, I made out the image of a dark shadow of a woman running away from me towards the bathroom. I called out in desperation after the shadowy image. Desperation? Interesting. No, don't run. I'm not mad at you. I just want to talk. The shadow stopped in its tracks. I continued. My name is Kartika. I'm curious. I've never witnessed anyone appear to me as a shadow before. Why are you a shadow? Because I exist in a lower dimension than you. A high-pitched voice of a woman arose from the shadow. I could tell she was nervous. She spoke quickly and succinctly, as though she expected our conversation to end any moment. She must have noticed I was not very satisfied with her vague response, as she soon added, "By the way, you can call me Mimi." I was still puzzled by what she said earlier, so I responded, "But I've seen earthbounds existing in a lower dimension before, and they never appeared as shadows to me." Seemingly cautious, she stayed a few feet away from me and hesitated slightly before answering. "You must have been vibrating in the same frequency with them, or," she paused to think again, "or altering your frequency to suit theirs. Your frequency and mine don't match, so I appear as a lower form, a shadow to you." Struggling to wrap my mind around this, I asked her, "Well, are you earthbound or not? What happened to you, if you don't mind my asking?" She finally slowly approached me, as if she had realized that I would not harm her, and began telling me her story. "Well, yes, I am an earthbound. I died when I was 9. I was hit by a car in 1978 in Los Angeles." I stood there puzzled. She certainly did not have the form of a 9-year-old girl, but rather that of a grown woman. I replied politely, "Forgive my curiosity, but I have met other girls who died young too, and they retained their youthful looks. But you don't seem to be 9 years old. You seem much older. How can that be? I thought earthbounds tend to look the same in life after death as they did in life." Even when it comes to earthbound, she intoned, there exist many sectors of dimensional existences. In my existence, it is the highest of the earthbound existences. Our existence greatly mimics that on Earth. I was entirely lost, so I asked, are you trying to tell me that everything that exists in the physical life on Earth exists in your dimension as well? Suddenly understanding, I went on quickly. So this means that the concept of time as it exists on Earth exists in your realm? Because you deem it to exist? And that maybe this is the reason why you age as one would age physically? Because your mind is altered by time? I guess, she said hesitatingly. I mean, most people in my existence died suddenly, and a few from self-mutilation. Puzzled, I asked, but why would you want to be in a lower existence or remain in earthbound when you could go to a higher place? As I concluded my sentence, however, I heard the discordant ringing of my alarm clock and was immediately pulled back to the physical body. When I woke up, I sat up and said out loud, knowing that my new acquaintance would hear me, I'm sorry for the interruption, but I have to go to school now. I have 2 art history lectures, and tonight I will promise we will converse again. I'm not a medium, unfortunately, so if you try to talk to me while I'm in my physical body, I won't be able to hear you or talk to you, although I may be able to sense you. Please don't think that I am ignoring you. That day, as I sat through my Buddhist and medieval art history classes, I experienced shock and disbelief, as I discovered how nearly every work of art from the past depicts multidimensional realms and beings, yet most people still think of these things as purely imaginary or symbolic. I remember my Buddhist art history professor projecting a slide of a Tibetan work of art to the class and commenting on the different versions of hell that the piece was depicting. I chuckled inwardly after hearing this, as I had visited some of those so-called hells in my travels. As I drifted into deep thought about Mimi, the earthbound I had met the previous night, and contemplated which dimensional existence she actually belonged to, my thoughts were distracted when I heard a girl in front of me whisper to her friends about what creative minds those artists must have been to imagine such scenarios. At the time, her comments made me feel both frustrated and disappointed. It became clear to me that although we live in a vast universe composed of many different galaxies, some people are too self-centered or too narrow-minded to believe that anything exists beyond the physical. Later that day, I continued my normal routine of completing my schoolwork and cooking myself dinner. While I was working on an assignment, I again sensed the earthbound's presence around me. It was highly distracting. I even heard high-pitched sounds in my left ear. The earthbound's presence was strong and carried with it a sense of urgency, so I decided to put my schoolwork aside and prepare to travel. As I was falling asleep, instead of detaching entirely from my physical body as usual, I heard the high-pitched noises again and saw various images flash in front of me, as though I were watching a movie. The images depicted a little blonde girl who was obviously raised in a wealthy family, along with a twin sister with whom she was clearly very close. As I watched her story unfold, I learned that she had spent most of her days with her nanny and playing the violin. One day, while she was walking down the street with her twin sister and nanny, she and her sister were hit by a car, missing the nanny by only an inch or two. I saw images of the little girl floating above her body, staring down at her physical self. Then I saw her sister in a wheelchair, obviously handicapped due to the accident. Suddenly I heard a voice echo through my mind. Are you okay? The images instantly disappeared, and I found the dark, shadowy woman I had met the previous night standing in the corner. She was thin, with long blonde curly hair and blue eyes, and was dressed in a long white dress. I recognized that I was in my room. The layout was the same, but there was something slightly different about it. I was confused and asked aloud, "Where did you take me?" "You're in my dimension now." Still baffled, I asked, "But I thought your dimension is lower than mine, so why am I here?" She paused to think, and an embarrassed look came across her face. I could tell that she didn't have an answer, well, or at least an answer that I would understand. She muttered, "Well, I don't know," and quickly looked away. Now, this thing about waking up in your bedroom, the astral version of your bedroom, and having it be kind of slightly different in details, this has been noticed by many out-of-body travelers, including Robert Monroe in his first book, Adventures Beyond the Body, is that it? Anyway, it's a common enough thing, and there are many sorts of theorizing about why it happens, and one's expectations, one's imagination. Objects on that astral level, and there is an astral level to your bedroom, which is the first place you'll see when you get out of body, can be molded by thought, even unconscious thought. And we're all subject to unconscious thought. I stood there thinking and remembered that I'd gone to sleep in a negative and exhausted mind state. There was an answer to my question right there. I decided to lighten the conversation up a bit and exclaimed, "This is very strange. This is my room, but not really my room." At this she asked cheerfully, "Come on, do you want me to show you around?" I nodded and followed her for a tour around my own apartment building. I could not help but notice how familiar yet strange it all appeared. It had the same shape and layout, but a drastically different composition. I told her about this and asked whether, on the previous night, I was in her dimension or she was in mine. "I don't know, but sometimes I go to your dimension and it takes a lot of energy. It drains me. I've actually seen you around a few times before, and yesterday I finally had the courage to approach you." The pieces were starting to come together. Numerous times prior, I'd felt the presence of somebody or something, and I would quickly snap photographs that, when developed, would only show shadows or orbs. It all made sense. I was being visited by earthbounds from lower dimensional existences who were using tremendous amounts of energy in the hopes of making their presence known to me. Yes, you'll find references in the various mediumistic and channeled literature from spirits who will talk from time to time about how much energy it takes to manifest, an image in front of the living person, and how it's, takes less energy to, flick the lights off and on, or make the curtains go back and forth, or turn on and off the taps, and various little tricks like that. She broke the silence. "I go to lectures too, like you." I looked at her with a confused look on my face. "No, not in your world," she continued. "We have two professors who died, one in 1991 and the other just recently. One of them used to be a chemistry professor and the other taught history. But now they both just lecture on earthbound realms," she explained. I looked at her in disbelief and asked, "But why? Why would they stay in a lower dimension rather than going to a higher one if they hadn't died with negative emotions or in a negative state of mind?" She explained to me that in the case of the professors, they wanted to further understand the connections between their dimension and the physical one. They had chosen to stay because they thought it was part of their lesson. They think both Einstein and Tesla were aware of multidimensional realities. "But what about you? Why are you still here?" I asked. She looked at me and hesitated for a few seconds, although our conversation had entered uncharted territory. But she must have sensed my dire curiosity as she continued. "Well, when I died, I saw a white light appear, and instead of approaching it, I ran opposite way, since I didn't want to leave my twin sister. I wanted so much to see what would happen to her and look after her. After that, I met friends, a group of people, and we become a community over time. The bonus of being here is that we get to play pranks on the living and people we know. But I think that the dimensional securities will probably come for me soon. They never force us, so they tend to know when we're ready or when we want to go or not." It's true. Spirit guides will visit the lower levels to see who's bored, ready to move on, ready to quit being the fool playing pranks. It's a common enough. It's like a little, search and rescue mission. They do it on many levels. And as I've mentioned before, and as has Bruce Mullen in his books, the people that have found themselves in those, what Bruce calls the hollow heavens, the heavens that have been devised and sustained unconsciously by the beliefs of extremely narrow-minded fundamentalist religious sects, who are sure they're the only ones that should be in heaven and not anybody else at all. There are people who kind of want to get out of that from time to time. And we do little patrols around there to see, looking for people that want to. And it's like trying to get people out of a prison camp. It's that bizarre. And But it can be done. You just have to be, a fast talker and a smooth operator, and sense who really needs to get out, who really has had enough of that little narrow little paradise, or less than paradise. Upon hearing her response, I knew I had a lot to share with her too. I told her that she would be able to check on her loved ones and see them even from a higher existence. But she did not believe this, telling me that in a higher existence one is only able to see one's loved ones during the first week of death. I told her that this wasn't true and described how I'd seen and visited people I knew who had died. See, there's your limiting belief system. I don't know where this woman's coming from, but only in the first week of death? Come on now. You can do it anytime. So even cultures that might believe in an afterlife or believe in reincarnation, they've often got fairly strict and limiting belief systems about how that whole system operates. And really, there isn't. There are no rules and regulations. There's sort of general sort of guidance stuff going on, but no rules and regulations. But you're different, she responded. You know this is real and you're aware of the multidimensional existences. But imagine if I go to a higher existence only to be able to come to my sister in her dream world. She'd just brush it off as though it's a dream full of subconscious gibberish. So right now your sister acknowledges your presence? Yes, she knows I'm around. I pray planks on her all the time. She needs me. She needs me. Listen to that. This isn't an obsessing spirit. This is a kindly, loving spirit. But obsessing spirits often have that justification. This person needs me. And soul rescuers, soul retrievers like myself and others, many others, will come across this. You'll come across an obsessing spirit. Let me give us an example. The client will be a depressed teenager, and the obsessing spirit will be a previously depressed teenager who committed suicide and thinks that they're helping, convinced that they're helping the living one get through their depression. And when in actual fact, ultimately what they're doing is making things worse, but they don't realize it. And it takes a bit of, arguing, debating, showing them different things to get them to move on. But that whole thing about she needs me, it's a repeated pattern, repeated behavior pattern. I shrugged and said, okay, the choice is yours. You've had many lives, probably loved many others besides your sister, and some of them are possibly roaming in the higher existence right now. As you know, this universe functions based on the law of free will. It's your choice to leave to go to a higher place or not. There are many more things to this existence than we know. It's just not the human world and a human cycle of living. There are many different types of planets and being. It's an exciting world. If I were you, I'd leave in an instant. I've seen the higher existences and other planets. I wish I could be free of this human world and simply roam, because to me, freedom is the most important feeling to indulge in. The freedom to think, the freedom to roam, the freedom to be free of the encased human mind of materiality and superficiality. Everything relating to the human world is created so that humans don't break free from their own indoctrinated minds. The worlds above are far, far, far better. I could tell that my words had sparked interest within her as I heard her chuckle and ask, "You really think so? You make it sound so wonderful." I replied, "Of course I think so. Do you think the most wonderful feeling I've ever felt while traveling multidimensionally?" She looked at me with a curious gaze and I continued, "Flying, the freedom that comes when you fly and roam to different galaxies. There's a famous Persian poet by the name of Rumi who was well aware of the truth of the human mind's capability. He once wrote, 'You were born with wings. Why prefer to crawl through life?' It's true. Humans crawl, walk, even create humongous, heavy, costly machines to go to Mars when the key is within their own minds. And you, my friend, have graduated from your lessons, so why would you want me to stay in the same grade?" I recalled her staring at me with her big blue eyes, smiling as she said, "You're right. I never thought about it this way before. So what do I do now? Should I wait, then, until the dimensional helpers come for someone and tell them I want to go too?" I shook my head and told her, "Silly, you already said it earlier. When you're ready and willing, they'll come for you. They'll know to come. So you have to tell them, request them to come for you. Tell them the time is now. And of course, remember to fill yourself with love. No matter how cheesy it sounds, it's true. The higher sphere is made up of love, and love itself is the key for you to get up and go there. Go on, try it. I remember her enthusiastically reciting the request out loud, calling upon the higher beings, as I did the same for her. Suddenly a portal-like tunnel of white light appeared before us rather than the spherical information I had previously the spherical formation I had previously seen in my travels. Using both mind and heart, I gave her all my love and encouraged her to proceed. I saw her go into it, and when I attempted to follow her, I failed, and once again found myself thrown back into my physical body with incredible force. Everything I said to her was based on knowledge I'd learned from my travels and adventures, but most importantly, it had come from my heart. The worlds above are indeed far better and less distant than we think. And now another one, the story of a mother. Accidental journeys occur when one's physical body is in a state of exhaustion, and this exhaustion often sends the unprepared traveler to a lower dimensional realm. Such was the case in the journey that I will discuss next. At the time, I had not a decent night's sleep in days, and my state of being was in a lower vibrational frequency due to the sadness I was feeling. I did not expect to travel energetically that night, thinking instead I would merely dream, but the universe proved to have other plans for me. I later realized that this particular experience was meant to teach me more about the lower dimensional realms. As I was fading into slumber, I suddenly felt as though I were sinking into my bed and being sucked into it by a strong, invisible magnetic force. I found myself in a state of nothingness in which everything was pitch dark, and I couldn't see anything. I heard what sounded like the low tones of piano music playing in the background. As all well-versed travelers know, the music you hear during an energetic journey will often resonate with the collective vibrational spectrum of the beings that reside within that particular dimension. For example, beautiful high-frequency music indicates a higher dimensional field in which love and light are the collective forces, while with low-frequency music, the opposite is true. I had landed in a place of complete darkness and low vibrational music, a lower dimensional realm, so immediately I was on my guard. I heard a man laughing at me in a sinister, mocking manner. I watched as he and a group of others approached me, and from my intuition and past experiences, I could tell that they were negative beings that intended to scare me. I felt a deep fear and tried to remain on guard. As they came closer to me, their snickering was interrupted by a woman with an American accent, who sternly ordered the negative man, "Leave her alone, Jake!" They left the area with an air of bitterness, and the woman who had saved me approached and said, "You're obviously not from around here, are you?" I told her that I wasn't, even though it must have been obvious. She noticed my confusion and explained, "You are currently in a dimension where the majority of people who have committed crimes, committed suicide, or experienced traumatic deaths go." She proceeded to explain to me that this dimension provides a controlled habitat for those who carry within them a plethora of negative emotions, such as hatred and revenge. These emotions are virtually engraved within these individuals. Surprisingly, most of them actually thrive on the sadness in their souls. She told me that their existence is in the interdimension, the dimension located between the physical dimension where we live and the lower dimension, where the lower entities reside. At this point, I understood that if these beings continued to roam unchecked in this interdimension, over time they would eventually become lower dimensional entities with gruesome features and appearances. Get that? Lower dimensional entities with gruesome features and appearances? Horror films. Where do you think they come from? She continued and told me her own story. She explained that she was from California, and the only love and happiness in her life had been her young daughter. Horrifyingly, her daughter was brutally murdered, and the killer had covered up his crime with what looked like an accidental fire, enabling him to get away with it. After the murder of her beloved daughter, she dedicated her life to exacting revenge on the murderer. But one day, after having had enough of this life of anger and vengefulness, she decided to kill herself. She told me the murderer's name and begged for me to report the name to the police once I returned to my physical body, so that she could finally rest in peace, as she explained it to me. As I had with Pak Tejo, I simply had to refuse. I knew that death in an excessively negative state of mind often leads to existence in a much lower dimensional realm. I immediately knew that if this woman continued to live with this dark hatred ingrained within her and the hunger for revenge eating away at her soul, she would soon begin to vibrate in the same frequency as the frightening lower dimensional entities. Nevertheless, from my many encounters with earthbounds, I was certain she was not a hopeless case, and that I could reignite the light within her. She guardedly thought about what I had said as I explained to her that all things in life are temporary and cyclical, composed of both ending and beginning. I explained to her that everything that had occurred during her time on earth was a mere lesson, and that her daughter was in another state of existence. I told her that if she wished to meet the spirit of her daughter, she must elevate her frequency. If she did so, I knew she would come back to earth to live another life. I begged her to remember her daughter's love, her one and only life force, and told her that this was the only escape, the only way to escape the dimension in which she was trapped. I also told her that we could manifest a portal through which she could travel to a higher dimension, as long as she promised me that she would cease dwelling in negativity and hatred. She promised me, and then I watched her go through the portal we had manifested, something I had learned by that time that anyone was capable of doing. After this, I was abruptly pulled back into my physical body. After waking up and making myself a cup of hot tea, I began to feel icy chills and a cold sweat overcome me. I could sense my ghost's presence, the woman briefly visiting me on her way to the higher dimension. Through my multidimensional travels, I've learned that love is the greatest energetic force of all, and the singular tool for universal communication. The quote, "Love makes the world go round," can be interpreted in many different ways. Obviously, round is the shape of a circle, which has no beginning and no end. In the context of energetics, this is a symbol of the eternal force behind all cyclical existences of the universe, the force of love. That is the reason why in various ancient scriptures the circle is depicted as the most powerful and whole geometric expression on the planet Earth, which it is. Creating portals. Yes, I don't know if I've mentioned this before in this series. I know I mentioned it somewhere else in some of my other videos, maybe not in the Afterlife Average Folks one. The part of southern Ontario I live is fairly recently discovered by Europeans. And, 1820, 1830, 1840, which is just 10 minutes ago in European terms, or Chinese. But there are many pioneer graveyards. And there's one quite near me, and there's others. I've mentioned this in some of my books. And when I go there, I find many people who died in, shall we say 1860, 1870, I'm not quite sure, it doesn't really matter. Well, in that time period, in a certain form of Christianity that said the dictate was you sleep in Jesus until Judgment Day. And guess what? A lot of them are still waiting for Judgment Day. And when I go there from time to time, I talk to them, and there's usually quite a crew. I don't mean hundreds, 10, 20, 25. And they'll often be a senior member of the church, a pastor or an elder brother who sort of takes it upon himself to overlook them all and will not enjoy my presence, as I'm usually there saying, you can go to heaven now, you don't have to wait. There is no Judgment Day. You can be welcomed into the loving arms of Jesus right now. And I create a portal above us, and I, say, on you go up there. And there'll be spirits looking down through the portal from the next dimension, encouraging them to come up. And, the pastor or the elder will be, doing the get thee behind me Satan stuff. And, what's that Dylan line? Satan comes disguised as a man of peace. That was a good one, Bob. A lot of bloody help that was. And you can encourage them to go up, but they're suspicious. I try to look like a little more normal than I look here. And some of them go, try to encourage the others, and they think they've been tempted into, a hell realm by, a demonic being. Anyway, that's a portal. And when I was told how to create it, it wasn't that hard, and I learned how to do it. As you will, if you wish. The musical sphere of the earthbounds. In my experiences traveling to lower dimensions, with few exceptions, it tends to involve interactions with earthbound spirits who are trapped in these dimensions and filled with strong emotions of hatred and desire for revenge. For this very reason, I always avoid traveling here unless I've been pulled into these dimensions for a certain purpose. Yes, don't just go wandering there. However, this next particular fated journey of mine proved to me that love does exist in this interdimension, and that therefore the souls in these dimensions have not been entirely overcome with negativity and hatred. Once again, I arrive into pitch darkness where I couldn't see a thing. This time I heard a man's deep voice speaking to me. Why don't you sit down over here and witness our only form of entertainment in this interdimensional level, where darkness is the only thing that exists? The entertainment soon began, and I heard a woman who sounded to be in her mid-20s, her melodious voice singing and vibrating through space with her love and sorrow. She was singing of the life she had led before and how she had ended it. She sang of her strong love for her husband that had resided within her, and of how he had betrayed her, combining feelings of deep sadness and pain with those of enduring love. I learned that she had killed her husband as revenge for his betrayal. A man's song followed her own, reminiscing of the great love he had in his life before it was ended and how he had destroyed it by cheating. He sang out of desperation, begging for his love's forgiveness in the chorus of the song. It was at this point that I realized that this man was, in fact, the lover of a woman who had sang before him. The third performer was a man in his late 50s. He had an extremely thick southern accent and sang nostalgically of his previous life, dwelling on how he had taken it for granted and dismissed it as unsatisfying. He continued singing of how he had realized, once he had entered the interdimension, that his home was in fact entirely and extremely vibrant and full of love. His song was titled Grey City, and the chorus went something like this. Grey City, how lovely it is, sipping a hot cup of tea. Grey City, how I miss thee, polluted by beautiful. After he ended his song, I heard a lilting voice rush through my mind, singing, "Music is best heard in the dark." Which reminds me of lying down in the evenings in the 70s when we didn't bother with television and listen to all that great music. Head on the carpet between the speakers and listening to great soundscapes like Tangerine Dream's Phaedra and many others, Tubular Bells. And we would enter a world of audio bliss for 50 or so minutes. Music is best heard in the dark. I was also told that various musicians over time have been inspired through subconscious travels to the differing realms, and upon waking found themselves writing an ingenious piece of music. It became clear to me that these performers wanted me to bring their music to the physical world, for they were living in complete darkness and wanted to be heard. When I returned to my physical body, I remembered this experience in great vividness. The absence of sight enables us to fully appreciate and hear music in every detail, for it is in this state that the dominant sense is closed and the brain remains solely focused on the sound. I discovered that one of the most valuable uses of music is to tell the story of our life through it. True music is a form of collective expression in which everything is conjoined. Thus, you can appreciate another's story merely by listening and connecting yourself to the words and vibrations. Music is an invisible force that connects everything within the universe. The right kind of music can certainly elevate one's frequency, while the wrong kind can lower it and block the listener's true potential. Well, thank you, Kartika Go, multidimensional traveler. And on the next episode, we will get to further of her adventures, both in the afterlife of this world and other planets. Such is the bravery and curiosity of Kartika. She will go anywhere. And more power to her, that's what I say. And until then, friends, I wish you a fond farewell. And was it? One of the spiritual teachers said, "Don't worry, be happy."